Crossing over styles and merging sounds has always been a big part of the evolution of music, and few musicians have had the same impact as Ashanti Floyd, better known as the Mad Violinist. Ashanti was born into music. Both his mother and father were accomplished musicians, and they ingrained in him a love for the violin. But it was his experimentation with other genres that set him apart as a musician. His creativity and skill netted him a full scholarship to the Berklee School of Music after graduating high school. Today, Ashanti is one of the top string arrangers in the music industry and has worked with major artists in all genres, from rap, hip-hop, pop, and more. He's been nominated for 6 Grammys and continues to help artists grow in the music industry. Today, we welcome the Mad Violinist on this episode of The Big Break.
When I was 3, my mom put the violin in my hands and taught me how to play. She's been playing for over 50 years. She's had a string school in Tallahassee, Florida for a little over 30 years. So I grew up playing in her string program after school, most days in elementary and middle school. She's a strong string educator. And when I was in the high schools and the middle schools that I went to were on the south side of Tallahassee, like we didn't have string programs. All we had was marching band. So I played the snare drum and the bass drum and the cymbals in marching band. I played all percussion. When I was in high school, I arranged the music for the marching band too. Did a lot of that. When I wasn't doing that, I was in church with my father. Playing the piano. My father is a pianist. That's how he and my mother met. They both were in a group together, basically. When they met, my father was going to FAMU and my mom was going to Florida State, and he was looking for a violin player and happened to find her. And so I basically grew up into a deep musical background. It's something that I ate and breathed growing up. Every day, no matter who I was with, either my mother or my father.
So were you mainly playing music, just playing the violin as a hobby, or was this something that your parents were kind of reinforcing as like, this is you're going to be a violinist when you grow up?
I was playing it as a hobby. It was a lifestyle, like I said, because it was my mom's life. But at the same time, they didn't say, "Oh, this is what you have to do." I have a twin brother and 2 siblings too. We all played, and I'm the only one who ended up taking it professionally. But they gave me options. They gave us all options. We were also a big sports family too. My parents, I had those parents that made sure we had every opportunity to put us in a position to where we had many things to choose from. You know what I mean? Sports, music, science, whatever it is. And so it wasn't something that they said I had to do, but they made sure they put me in situations where I was very encouraged to do it. And I would say the 8th grade was when I decided, I told my parents, this is what I want to do. So they put more into it after that. So after I made up my mind, they're like, okay, this is what you're going to do. You have to take it seriously.
Gotcha. So what did taking it seriously mean for you at that point?
Well, I told my parents that my mom did things like raise money by cooking dinners. She was also a chef on the side, I'd say. She did dinner and music parties. She would raise money, and she would also reach out to the local newspaper and the local churches for me to go to some of the most prominent summer camps as a violist and a violinist. Really as a viola player. And I remember in the summer of the 9th grade, she sent me to Interlochen String Camp. She sent me to London, to a place called Cadenza Strings. My parents just fought hard for me to pursue what I'm doing after I said I wanted to do it. So basically at a young age. They put me in different situations.
So what was it like going from Tallahassee to these different camps and different places with what I assume to be pretty talented people?
Man, it was crazy. It was a crazy experience because I got to size myself up, sort of say, with considered some of the best young string players and musicians in the world. And so that gave me a lot of confidence going back home, knowing that, hey, I got chosen like an interlocking arts camp. I was a part of something called the Advanced String Quartet. And that's where over 5,000 people auditioned, and they chose 16 to study with some of the top quartets in the world. And out of 4 viola players, they chose me out of those 16 people and 4 viola players, to go to camp just from auditioning, sending a cassette tape, audition tape. And so coming from Tallahassee and being in those positions was really, man, it was a crazy feeling because I realized how much my mom and all my teachers put into me, that you can succeed from anywhere, no matter where no matter where you're from, just as long as you apply yourself. And I realized that my mom put me in the positions where I was just more advanced than a lot of people. She made sure I knew a lot of theory before middle school, So I realized that all her teachings and wanting me to apply myself with theory and things like that was for a certain reason, because she knew wherever I went, I would be ahead.
Yeah, so you get to go to these camps and kind of size yourself up, see, because I assume back in Tallahassee you were just the best because you had this training for your entire life.
It would be crazy. I didn't realize how inclined I was at a young age. I would say I didn't realize it until I went to middle school, when I was in the drum section, and I knew what key that everybody was playing in. When the teacher, in the 6th grade, the teacher would ask us, ask all the horn players and the woodwind players to memorize all their keys and their flats and their sharps. And I'm sitting here in the drum section, and the teacher's asking all these questions, and I know them,
Yeah.
And so I definitely got that strict training.
And at this point, what kind of music are you typically playing?
I don't limit myself, man. I'm doing a little bit of everything. I'm working on some country projects. Myself, I'm working on a cinematic project. I've been working on a lot of different short film scores and things like that. I'm working on something right now for film festivals, like Atlanta Film Festival, like an original piece with a film crew and things like that. I have my days. To me, it's about multiple streams of income. I have something every day that I focus on. One day I focus on making samples for producers, which I've been doing for a long time. Gotten on a lot of records for that. The next day I'll focus on writing some sheet music, because I have a big violin following, from young players that have followed me for over a decade, So I'm working on sheet music right now to sell that. Just really stretching all my abilities.
But back in high school and when you're going to these camps, is it mainly like classical music?
At the camps, all classical music. Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. So what happened? I mean, after you're kind of doing this in high school and you're getting practice and you're meeting new people, what happens after that?
Well, I started getting into other genres of music. My mom was strict on classical. She teaches classical music, but she's also a pastor and a gospel violinist growing up. And she played a lot of secular music too. And so I would say my mom was a little ahead of her time. A lot of the stuff that I was doing and the things she taught me, she was really teaching me things that would separate me from a lot of people, which is how I learned how to move out here, through all those teachings and things like that.
So you started experimenting?
Yeah, I started experimenting a little bit, and then I started playing a little jazz on the violin, and that led me to auditioning for Berklee College of Music, where I got a full violin scholarship there. for jazz. I remember my mom driving me to Atlanta to audition for it's called the World Scholarship Tour at Berklee. I think the auditions were at the AIM, the Institute of Music. I remember auditioning. I played "Ain't No Sunshine" on the violin by Bill Withers, but I also played a jazz tune by Charlie Parker on my violin. And I remember 2 months later getting a letter to have a full ride to Berklee. And so my life sort of changed then when I had to move from Tallahassee to Boston from the age of 19 after I graduated high school. That was a whole different experience, man.
Yeah, not as much sunshine in Boston in the winters for sure. And that's not, I'm sure, wasn't the biggest change. So what, I mean, when you got that letter, did you expect to get that, or was that a surprise to
It
you?
was honestly a surprise to me. You know, in the auditions, the judges weren't holding back a little bit. They were like, man, they were saying things they haven't heard that much soul come from a violin before and things like that. So it gave me a clue that the school was going to offer something. But the full scholarship letter was a big surprise. It was a surprise in a lot of ways because a lot of people don't understand that between me and my 3 other siblings, I was like the last likely person to get a full scholarship. And not that I wasn't good or anything like that, but I wasn't the best student in school. I had my ups and I had my downs. You know, my students, my siblings were all straight A students. You know, I had my A's some days, and other days I just wanted to entertain. I was just the entertaining one at school. And I ended up graduating with a decent GPA, but I knew that my talent did a lot of that.
And somebody you mentioned, I mean, were there a lot of jazz strings players? Because it seems like, jazz, you always think of, the horns or the brass, but not necessarily a violin.
No, there weren't. My mom, fortunately, she put me on to some jazz string players growing up. From back in Joan Ponte, Noel Pointer. There were a couple of before my time, during her time growing up. And my mom, like I said, my mom could play those things. And so the influence was right in my household. I got a lot of bends and slats from listening to my mom. I still haven't heard a violinist play a love song like my mom till this day because she's that good. And so that influence, I was blessed to have that in my home. Not only her playing the violin, but her putting me on the other violinists. But coming out of high school, going into Berklee, man, I was really out here alone, pushing a lot of boundaries and doing things that other cats weren't doing. What year was that? Like 2002? I was out in the streets. At first, a lot I was getting criticized. Well, even before I got to Berklee in high school, I got criticized a lot when I first started to experiment because I was doing bends and wells on my violin like Jimi Hendrix and things like that. And you can imagine string educators and people looking like, what is he trying to do? And until I finally made it make sense. It latched on to this. Everywhere I played, everybody just went crazy. And when I started to see that, I started to expand my sound and things like that.
Well, initially, did you feel like maybe I shouldn't be doing this? Maybe I should just stick to the basics, or not the basics, but stick to the script, kind of? Or were you always like, I'm just going to do my own thing and forget what everyone else says if it's not what they want to hear? Then
yeah, I've always been a person that's always just marched to the tune of my own beat, man. A little bit. I feel like I was fortunate to start playing the violin at such a young age because I had already played through a lot of things and seen a lot of things from a young age. I started playing in blues clubs when I was like 13, And so anything that anybody could tell me about, oh, you should do it this way and do it that way, 10 times out of 10 at a young age, I had already done a lot of things, a lot of the ways that people were saying. What was important to me was playing what was in my soul first, because that's the only way I felt like I was going to continue playing the violin or just doing anything. You know, I liked playing classical and I still like to play classical and other genres of music, but it was in a way that I felt like I could identify myself with the voicings, what I was trying to get out musically to other people, because I grew up in just in a whole different background. Like when I went to school and played classical the first time on my viola, people looked at me weird. You know, one day I turned on the radio and started playing some radio songs, Erica Badu and things like that. And I remember taking it to school, and it was just like, wow, everybody went crazy. I played at an assembly at school that got shut down. They went so crazy. Yeah, and I finally, that's when I learned in high school, like, wow, this right here isn't just a voice, but I'm connecting with the people around me that couldn't understand from my neighborhood, that couldn't really identify themselves with what I was playing with before. It's like a whole language that I can connect with people who are like me, you know, and from my neighborhood, you know.
Yeah, it's powerful that you found that way to work it in. What happened at Berklee once you got through there, and I guess you're still at Berklee now, I guess in the story, but what was your experience like there?
Well, my experience there was up and down, man. I first of all, I took an entrance exam and I tested out in my first 2 years at Berklee. I skipped all the ear training. I skipped all the harmony. I mean, I tested out a lot of stuff, and so I started off basically as a junior. Like I told you, my mom made sure I learned all this theory. Like my theory from classical music over to jazz was so sharp coming into Berklee. I was taking tests amongst like drummers and things like that, you know. And so the classes there started at a lower level for people like drummers to understand harmony and things like that, or people who only play single note instruments and not chorded instruments. I fortunately grew up playing both and theoretically learning both. So I came in there as a junior. The only thing about Berklee is the full scholarship didn't include living then. You know, living in Boston was really expensive. And so that was costing like on loans like $10,000 a semester. But I also had a twin brother in college and a big sister in college and a little sister about to go to college. And I saw my parents couldn't handle it anymore, like reaching for the loans and stuff. And so I got out of Berklee, you know, and I hit the streets basically. I started playing in clubs up north. And I remember when I was 19, I made so much noise that I made it on the 106 in Park with Free and AJ, you know. That's where the name The Mad Violinist really started. Right after not being able to get back in school because I couldn't afford living, playing in the streets of Boston and New York, I just happened to make it on TV on 106 on Park and BET. And after that, you know, started doing a lot of things as The Mad Violinist out here in the streets. So I went back home to Tallahassee and I started working with my childhood friend since middle school, probably since before that, but T-Pain. I was riding over to Payne's house, or Fahim as I know him, growing up all the time, just going back and forth in beats and things like that. And right after Berklee, right after 106 in Park, when I moved home because I couldn't afford school, T-Pain just all of a sudden just blows up when I'm sprung, you know? But I had records that I produced myself with him on the streets. And so when he signed his first deal to Jive Records and put out Rapper Turned Singer, his first album, I landed my first major placement as a producer on that album.
So you moved back to Tallahassee and you were working with him on just different beats and different songs? Yeah,
I mean, we were friends growing up, so I just go visit sometimes just to listen to his music. You know, we were just Ashanti and Fahim from Tallahassee on the streets, man. You know, we had a close relationship. We were in middle school band together. We were in a drum section together. Payne, His father used to play drums in FAMU's marching band. We were the closest of friends. We were each other's competition, basically. We were the two guys in Tallahassee making beats growing up.
So was that a hard decision for you to leave Berklee and then move back to Tallahassee, or did it just seem like the right thing to do?
It seemed like the right thing to do because when I was at Berklee, I got into a lot of trouble in the music business early because the fact that what I did was so rare, everybody was licking their chops to get me into something. And I was so young, I didn't know any better. All these dollar signs just looked great to me. I was in a rock group up there at Berklee, and we had a lot of potential, like a lot of rock groups think. We recorded a lot of albums. We were traveling and things like that, and we met these two guys who were head of like some big corporate companies within NASA, who said they wanted to manage us, and I ended up signing the bad contracts, and it was pretty bad. So after I got off of 106 in Park, all these people started calling, like people that represent Eminem and Ludacris and all these people. But the bad part was I couldn't work with none of those people because I signed a contract while I was at Berklee with this rock band. So it took my father, when I moved back to Tallahassee, it took him like 2 years and $7,000 for me to get me out of this contract with an attorney. And I kid you not, I got it out of that contract a month before Payne's album came out.
So what was the contract? Was it like an exclusive, you can't work with anyone except for this?
Yeah, except for the band.
And when you signed it, it just seemed like a good idea, but it didn't turn out to be that way.
Yeah, man, I was just a young kid, man, from this small ass Tallahassee, Florida, looking
right.
at a contract with all these dollar signs, and we'll put you in these condos in Texas, and you can come out here and all this good shiny stuff. And and I called my dad and I called my aunt. I was like, should I sign it? And I was like, hesitating. I was like, and I signed it right there on the spot. My first young lesson.
It seems like a lot of young musicians get to have that same story of the dollar signs sound real good, and then it turns out it's not to be true.
Not to be true at all.
Yeah.
And that's after a couple of stints with that. That's when I decided to move back to Tallahassee. And I moved back to my parents' house, and I cleared out my room and I turned it into a studio.
And what did you do in the studio that you built?
Man, I was making beats for everybody in Florida. I was making records for people, and I was out on the streets. I was making beats for a lot of the artists in T-Pain's old group, the Nappy Heads, and making music for him and a lot of independent artists. But I would just really made a name for myself in the streets as a beat maker, more than a violinist. Everybody knew what I could do. Everybody knew my nickname, and that's what made me more special, even as a producer. So I came back home, and everybody and their mom was pulling up to my parents' house and knocking on my window. While I was beating the whole neighborhood down. I had car speakers in that room, man. It was so crazy.
Did your parents get a little bit tired of the music producing going on after a while, or were they cool with it?
Man, I know they got tired sometimes, because after a while they're wondering, okay, where is this gonna go? Why is he in my house? We sent him to Berklee. I'm paying to get out of this contract. But at the same time, they were really supportive. Like my father built all my computers, from scratch. He would go to the Florida State surplus auctions and buy a whole bunch of computers parts, and just build me a new computer from those parts to make music on. We also get speakers from out of those auctions and help me load up my room so I could produce. I think when it turned the corner for my father that he realized that I could really do this was the T-Pain album, because not only did I get good residuals off of that and get paid from that, but when that first royalty check came in and we opened it, it wasn't a huge amount. I think it was like $4,000 or something like that. But that's the most money I've seen from a song, period. you know. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember that my father looking at me, and he goes, "You know what, son? I think you can do this."
As a growing artist or songwriter, keeping royalties coming in is important for keeping the bills paid. It's also important to keep an eye on those royalty payments. A lot of people we worked with here at Royalty Exchange were having a tough time making sense of the royalties that are getting paid. So we built a free tool called Know Your Worth that automatically analyzes every royalty payment made on your music. It breaks it all down in an easy-to-understand analysis with some insights that would be impossible to find elsewhere. Plus, it connects you with the thousands of investors on Royalty Exchange and allows them to make you offers on your music. So far, musicians have raised over $1 million for new projects, new ventures, and a whole lot of other things just through the Know Your Worth app. If you're earning royalties, you should be keeping track of them, and Know Your Worth makes it easy. It only takes about 3 minutes to connect an account, and the tool will automatically update over time. Just visit worth.royaltyexchange.com or find the link in the show notes to get started. Now, let's get back to the interview. Yeah.
You know, and I was laughing in the back of my head like, man, this is crazy. Yeah, I think I can do this too. But to see like my dad's whole attitude change too.
That was reassuring for you?
Yeah, it definitely was, because they finally saw what all those irritating nights in that room banging down the house paid out to be, you know?
Yeah.
And so, and when I say it got crazy, like one day some lady broke my window looking for her son because he was in the house listening to beats. She came up to the window and she broke the glass, and I didn't know what it was. And my father we both walked into the living room, and I grabbed a bat and I just ran outside, and then it was this lady looking for her son, and I put the bat down. Like, oh, you know, so me making beats became like a popular thing too. Moving back home.
So what happened after the T-Pain album kind of took off and he exploded? Did you kind of continue on with him, or what happened next?
Nah, man. One thing about when you have an artist blow up in your hometown, it's a lot of people try to put their hands in one small pot, you know? And with Pain, a lot of people in the neighborhood and a lot of people from the old group, just when you don't have many people in the city blow up like that, everybody feels like you owe them something because you start to get some songs on the radio or some money and things like that, you know. And I'm pretty sure Payne had to watch his back with a lot of things and things like that. And I saw so much going on that I just took my own way after that, you know, because I started to get stirred up into a big pot of hometown noise in a way that I felt uncomfortable with. And I was getting myself into situations where I saw the music business young, how, you know, older cats and not everyone's your friend. People can come in and try to snake you too, you know. And I'm not saying that with Payne. I'm saying with people in the music industry around his situation. Everybody trying to find a way. A lot of people trying to find a way to him through the people that work with him, through his friends, and not some of the greatest ways. And so I sort of went my own way, you know. I went my own way completely. The second, before I moved to, that's when I moved to Atlanta, right after that album came out. But before I moved to Atlanta, in Tallahassee, I met the J.U.S.T.I.C.E, who moved from Tampa to Tallahassee. Kenny, who was in the J.U.S.T.I.C.E during that time, and we used to play at this club together called The Warehouse in Tallahassee at a bebop jazz night, not even knowing who each other was, you know. And one day my friend Jay Mills reached out to them when they were looking for a string player, and the J.U.S.T.I.C.E had a house in Tallahassee. And I went over to that house and I met them and I recorded on a song with them called Bust Your Head Bust Your Head by Young Buck, which ended up being on Young Buck's album. I recorded like 100-some tracks of strings on that record. So then, before I even moved out of Tallahassee, I had a relationship with Pain. I had a relationship with the Justice League, but I also had a relationship from my work on the streets in Florida with producer Kane Beats. I don't know if you know Kane Beats. Kane is in the building, they call him.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a relationship with him. So when I moved to Atlanta, which was an accident, by the way, I sort of had relationships already from working with all these people. You know, even though I came here with nothing, I came to Atlanta 13 years ago with my friend. His name is Adrian Crutchfield. He plays the saxophone. He ended up playing for Anthony Hamilton and Prince and Bette Miller and Lionel Richie. Right now, he's on tour with CeeLo. He's one of my best friends.
Mm-hmm.
He went to Florida State. He came up here to audition for Neo on the sax, and he needed somebody to ride with him 13 years ago. And I was like, cool, I'll ride with you. And me being just a musician producer, I'm thinking, okay, I'm coming to Atlanta. I'm not coming here for anything, but I'm just going to pack up all my equipment and take it anyway. You know? And so I come in here and I sit in his Neo audition with him while he's playing his sax and things. And we both had a mutual friend that stayed here from Florida State. We were sleeping on her floor here to do the audition. And I was hitting people up during the audition, telling them when I was in town. So I told the Justice League I was in town, and they happened to be working with Young Jeezy on the Recession album. Mm-hmm. And they're like, cool, come to the studio. So I came to the studio. Jeezy was there. They were all working during that time on that album. And I ended up tracking on 2 songs on that album. A lot of the strings with them. And I hadn't even moved here, hadn't decided or anything. And so a couple of days after Adrian auditioned, he was driving back to Tallahassee and he thought I was coming with him. And I was like, hey, man, I don't want to come home. I'm not going back home. You know? And so I left my home. I left my computer and my equipment and my 2 pairs of jeans and my busted ass shoes in my friend's apartment, and she let me crash on the floor. And Adrian went back to Tallahassee by himself, and I called my parents. I was like, "Hey guys, I'm not coming back home. I'm staying here till I figure it out." You know, and so I just sleeping on her carpet, playing in clubs around here like Sugar Hill. I would pop up to what's the name of that cafe? 299. I was just playing all these places, but at the same time making noise. It's the new cat in town. You know, and when I tell you, like, one thing just leads to the next if you just put your face in the place. I was playing at Sugar Hill, and this Asian cat walks up to me, and he goes, "Hey, man, my name is Malay." You know, I don't know if you ever heard of producer Malay. And he goes, "I'm working on John Legend's album right now, man. I didn't even want to come here to Sugar Hill tonight, but my friend dragged me out here. But I love your violin player." He goes, "I'm also working with this artist named Yelawolf, and we want to experiment. We want to do some fiddle stuff on his music, man." And gave me his number. And I was like, cool. He said John Legend. I was like, that's enough to get me to drive out somewhere, you know?
Yeah.
And so the next day, he hit me up, gave me his address, and it's an address to somebody's house, you know? So somebody who's a freaking legend, I didn't even know at that time. And so I pull up at his house, is KP's house, Kawan Prather is his name, prominent A&R, one of the biggest in the game. And I go to his basement, and Malay's sitting there recording with Yelawolf. And that was my first time meeting Yelawolf. And we just talked for a little while, and we just started vibing out on some of Yelawolf's new records. I took my violin out and started fiddling on them. And we made a whole EP after a while. Also, within the first week of meeting them, recorded a string arrangement on a John Legend record too. And so that was my start in Atlanta right there, from being in the studio with Jeezy to, being in the studio with KP and Malay. Because I went on to get my first set of Grammy nominations with KP and Malay too. But also tour with Yelawolf Man.
Mm-hmm. So were you kind of like maybe oddity isn't the word, but like something new when you were in the studio and you're in there with like a violin and these guys are just used to people coming in and maybe using their computer to do something, but you're in here with a violin. Was that like something that was unusual to them, that was like really interesting?
Yeah, it was unusual to a lot of the cats I was working with. Because by that time I was working with KP Malay, the J.U.S.T.I.C.E, and Kane Beats, to the point where it was like, man, you have a guy here walking to the studio with his backpack, his violin, his viola, cello, laptop, and MIDI keyboard, a string arranger that can play 30 instruments, and a producer. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and not just that, as a producer, I'm an artist too. I've helped bend a lot of genres on the violin. And so I came into the studio, I'm sitting here playing fiddle stuff for Yelawolf, but at the same time, I'm doing string arrangements with John Legend. And then I'm working on this Jamie Foxx record where I'm on the keys playing like R&B music, doing the framework for Malay, And so when I moved to Atlanta and started working like that, I realized I had something different.
Mm-hmm.
I came to Atlanta to be a producer. That was my main goal. But then I realized, man, I can move around like crazy being a co-producer. Almost like a ghost producer.
Yeah.
For and with other producers. And I've made most of my living like that. I do that till this day. I make samples and I blow up people's ideas for people,
Mm-hmm.
other producers.
Right. So when you're tracking the violin, at least back in those days, because this is like mid 2000s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are you in there with a particular idea, or are you just laying down, a few dozen different licks on the violin and seeing what works with the record?
A little bit of everything. A lot of times I'll come in there and the record's already done. They just need a string arrangement. So I'll take out my violin, viola, and cello and create a full orchestra. Growing up playing in orchestras and string arranging and knowing theory, I automatically hear those arrangements in my head, as soon as I hear the songs. But only thing I'm not focusing on the arrangement. I'm going to focus more on the feel than the technical aspect, because technically I already know what I'm hearing most of the time when people play it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so, my thing is just sonically knowing I'm capable of doing what makes sense on any record, sonically, because because I'm capable of doing a lot. So when I hear something, if whether it needs a fiddle arrangement or string arrangements, or I feel like the synth needs to be replaced with the analog synth because it might be too heavy or something like that. That's just how my ears are trained.
Yeah. It must have been such a gift for you to come in the studio for those producers and be able to do all that stuff, because, they have to, I'm sure they have to farm it out to a whole lot of different people, but just to have you come in and do it must have been amazing.
Yeah, man, it's crazy working relationship, man. It's one of those things where you don't believe my flow with a lot of producers unless you see it, because once we get comfortable, what it takes a lot of people to do, a long time to do, it takes me to do it in a short amount of time. Once in the groove with somebody, and it cuts out a lot when having to put things together for a lot of producers as well. Having one person that can play a lot of instruments, but at the same time, I have a team. I have people around me that are capable of doing dangerous things like myself too, sonically. Like I have a guitar and bass player and a guy who collects moogs. Sonically, he records all things analog. he does all those things by himself. Between the both of us, we could probably play like 50, 60 instruments. You know, his name is Tyler. Tyler records on all the Justice League stuff now, and a lot of things. Like he did a lot of the guitars and synths and basses on all of the Maybach Music 6 and all other the Ross and all his Easy stuff and all that stuff that the Justice League just came out with. Me and him are like a team. So sonically, us two now are just we can make anything happen on a record. That's how we that's how I sort of pitch it to producers. But they know that too. But at the same time, you know, just telling them, hey, don't when you work with me or you work with anybody on my team, don't come in there with a limited mind or just know we're capable of doing anything that you hear in your head. You know?
Do you think that reputation kind of precedes you now?
Yeah, it is more than ever now because that's all I get called for now is to basically people call me to shape sounds. Basically, that like I got a call a couple of weeks ago because a Celtic sample couldn't get cleared for this pop record for an artist that we know. I can't say, and so I just basically told them just to send me the framework without the sample from the producer, and I called my boy Tyler. Man, we played like accordion, piano, violin, guitar. We took away all the producer synths and replayed them analog on some moves. You know, recreated an original Celtic type sample and remade the whole track, you know?
Man. That's awesome.
Yeah, so they won't have to get anything clear, but at the same time have something even better.
Right.
You know?
Man, yeah, I can see how valuable it is to a lot of producers. So after you kind of, you met Yelawolf and Malay and you guys recorded that one time, like what happened after that? Would you say that was like the real turning point for you in Atlanta, or was there something else that came in the future?
Well, I would say that was my beginning turning point. That's what made me, that really established me as an Atlanta native right there, really. Like, okay, now I'm doing this as a job here. Now I live here. After about 3 or 4 years working with Yelawolf, we went our separate ways. Just different directions, you know? We wanted to go different directions, so it was cool. That's when I really took the Mad Violinist serious. My name and got on YouTube and started really doing my thing as an artist. You know?
Doing the self-promoting.
Doing self-promoting. I think now I have over 30 million YouTube views or something like that. Because my YouTube channel just, at first, I was one of the only people really doing it. You know, doing things that people didn't normally see on the violin. Hip-hop had been seen on the violin before, but not with the twist that I was doing it. Just even playing the melody in general. I was up on YouTube, you know, one of the first violinists to take any R&B tune and things like that and play the whole melody of the whole song and turn it into my own, you know. And so my channel was just becoming fuel. I remember bringing in dubstep violin, you know, I was the first person on YouTube. I introduced the world to dubstep violin. And I remember it was going really, really crazy, getting 50,000 views a day on some videos. And became this craze that other artists like Lindsey Sterling and all these other people picked up, you know? And those things were coming together even with the stuff I was doing with producers, because after a while, producers would love it so much I began to have more freedom on records. You know, let's say I would say a turning point would be on working on the Right Above It with Kane. Kane sent me Right Above It by Lil Wayne and Drake, and I put these heavy string stabs on them that ended up giving Right Above It like this really triumphant sound. You know, a lot of people were asking, like, what plug-in were those strings? You know? And then Kane and I dug into that sound some more and created, you know, The Show Goes On by Lupe Fiasco. And that's where Kane and I were so comfortable. Kane, when we worked together, he was also a fan of me, not just as a producer, but as an artist. And so when we worked on tracks, he was always trying to figure out how to sneak me in on some violin line. You know, sometimes Kane would turn on a record in the studio and make me just freestyle. You know, he had this song by Jeezy called "Tell Me It's Showtime." He would always make me freestyle too, just because he wanted to have fun. You know, and I remember during The Show Goes On, I snuck in a violin solo in that song that became very prominent. Like thousands of young violin players got on YouTube when that song came out and just played my line from that song. And from that song, that's how I met Lupe Fiasco. I did a violin improv to that song on YouTube. And I ended up going on tour with Lupe because of that song. And while on tour, we got nominated for like 2 Grammys for that. You know, and it became his top selling hit too. It went number 9 on Billboard.
Show Goes On and Right Above Her, those were like 2 just huge songs. So, you know, it must have just been amazing to have that. And then the Grammy nominations must have been just like the icing on the top. What was that like with the Grammy nominations for you? Was that like affirmation?
Man, it was crazy. It was crazy. It was something I totally didn't expect, man. The first Grammy nominations came on Fantasia's album, working with KP and Malay. Her album Back to Me. I did string arrangements on 2 songs on there. Those Grammy nominations came, and I was like, "How did this happen?" And I'm still homeless as hell. Like, how can you get Grammy nominations and still be homeless as hell? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say homeless as hell. I mean, I was living a little better. I was starting to see those, you know, those union checks and things. I was blessed, you know, but still like fresh in it, you know? And so those Grammy nominations to me were just a little mind blowing. It definitely made me feel like I can really do this on another level. And made me turn my hustle up even a lot more, you know?
Yeah. What did your parents think of those when you got those nominations? Since they were always pushing you and they saw the potential from, you know, the time you were 3.
They were like, wow, you know, they were very happy. They were excited about them.
Yeah.
You know, I know it's surreal to them living in that moment. I remember when The Show Goes On came out, the music video came out during Christmas. I went back home to visit in Tallahassee. And I just kept like MTV videos and other things running. And the music video just came on, kept coming on while I was home with my pops. You know, and it was just it was a crazy thing to witness because I'm just, you know, just coming home for the holidays and you can just hear my work just jump on TV right there.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah. So they've always been very proud, but I think they have always expected me to do this at a higher level.
Well, what have you been working on recently, and what's kind of coming up for you?
Recently, I've been working a lot with just my friends in the gang, coming together more, like with my friend Lil C. Lil C, within the last, since August, has had about 5 or 7 records come out, you know, and my production partner Tyler, the one I told you about tracks for the Justice League, I made that connection with him and Lil C because I knew it would be a really good relationship. Been on a good amount of records. I know they just put out one with Mike Epps and Big Boy and Sleepy Brown that they just came out with. But that basically what I'm working on right now with all those guys is just creating the next movement, you know, sort of formulating a new team. And I got some things I can't say right now, but some great things happening.
Yeah.
that people will see really soon. All I can say is that all the hard work and consistency from being a track man and a person that creates samples and produces is paying off, because people want me around a lot more now. People want to make sure I'm around and creating good records. And so some great things are happening um, as a result.
Yeah. And so you're bringing in some younger guys and bringing in some older guys and kind of creating this team around you?
Well, yeah, a little bit of both. And they're all, everybody, like I said, just friends that have been in the game for a long time that just want to come together and win, but at the same time, win doing business right, win treating each other right, respecting each other as producers and musicians. That's one of the most important things I feel out there. That a lot of these musicians out here feel comfortable in the studio with who they're working with, because a lot of musicians get overlooked and cheated. I feel being excited to be on records, but so excited that they forget that there's a business aspect to this. And when those records come out, they're not paid, or they feel like they need publishing, but it's too late. Or either it's too late, or they have to do a whole lot to get that done. Or just need somebody to speak up for them. Right now, having a team to me is important in that aspect too, because we're building a team of people that look out for each other as well in the music industry.
Important.
Yeah, that's really important. Right now, I'm getting into a situation here. My friends say I'm accidentally becoming a manager for other musicians, because I'm helping so many musicians out right now to the point where I need to go ahead and just start a business. Because the musicians, I feel like even before the producers, the musicians make the world go round. And it's a lot of us out here playing and creating, but few that know the business very well. Especially when you're like me 30 years ago and you just get excited. You come in and you move right to Atlanta, and I think I was on like 13 records within like 2.5 months. It was that crazy.
Yeah.
At the same time, I was so young, I learned a lot of lessons the hard way at the same time. Yeah.
Is that something that you considered, though, is kind of starting a business and, helping people out that way, or is that just more of an idea right now?
I'm considering it now. It's past the idea phase. I'm in the name finding and paperwork and all that stuff phase right now. I'm definitely in the building phases of that. It's a lot of people that tell me. DJ Burn One told me I should do it. I mean, all my musician friends, everybody. And so, because I've given a lot of people advice on how to handle musicians on their records too. And so,
that seems like an important thing to get done.
Just want to make sure that everybody out here is being treated right out, because it's a cutthroat business.
Yep.
And it's not made for the weak. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about while we're still chatting?
Not much of anything, man. I can say the one piece of advice I want to give before we close out, man, to anybody doing this on the come up, getting those checks, things like that. Make sure you learn about your taxes. Make sure you're paying those taxes. Make sure you open your business. All that music money coming in, it's not all yours.
Yeah.
make sure you know the percentage that you have to pay the government, or you know your way around that. You start you a business and get you a good accountant. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another one of those things that that you got to know, but there's no one's going to tell it to you until it's too late.
No one's going to tell it to you, you know. And I try to tell a lot of young folk that, you know, it caught up. Some of my wildness in the 20s caught up to me, but not to a point where it's out of control. You know, I was able to take care of it, but man, if I didn't take care of it and figure it out when I did, it would be. I know some people that can't live. You know.
Yeah.
And
the tax man comes down hard on you.
Yeah, so that's what my one piece of advice is, to make sure that you know that doing this music thing, those taxes aren't coming out of our checks. That you got to pay them shits.
Yeah.
You know, so that's all.
Well, man, it's been great to talk to you and hear your story.
Oh, man, I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode. You can follow Ashanti on Instagram and Twitter, which are linked in the show notes. We'll have a new episode out next week on Tuesday. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you can get that downloaded automatically. You'll be listening to more musician stories every single week. Thanks for listening, and have a good one.